Okay, so we are on the 6th of January 2022, and we'll pay homage to three architects. The first one will be the Italian Baldassare Peruzzi, born in 1481 and died in 1536. Let's read a little bit about him. But before we read a little bit about him, let's contemplate this engraving. Well, we don't know if this engraving, I know where this engraving comes from. I have myself a few engravings of this. It's known to me the name of the engraver. You see here the initials. But this is a portrait. Usually, the engravers took some liberty in the portrayals, but it's a nice engraving, I would say. Anyway, Peruzzi. Let's read. Baldassare Tommaso Peruzzi, born the 7th of March, 1481, and he died on January 6, 1536, was an Italian architect and painter, born in a small town near Siena, in Ancaiano, frazione of Sovicile, and died in Rome. He worked for many years with Bramante, Raphael, and later Sangallo, during the erection of the new St. Peter's. He returned to his native Siena after the sack of Rome in 1527, where he was employed as an architect to the Republic. For the Sienese, he built new fortifications for the city and designed, though did not build, a remarkable dam on the Bruna River near Giuncarico. He seems to have moved back to Rome permanently by 1535. He died there the following year and was buried in the rotunda of the Pantheon near Raphael. Now you can imagine to be, buried near Raphael in the Pantheon is not a little thing, and he was. So obviously he was a very appreciated artist and architect. A portrait of Baldassare Peruzzi in the book of Giorgio Vasari. Sorry for the resolution. Now some drawings by Peruzzi. This is almost a textbook on perspective. Palladio, who lived and worked after Peruzzi, he was younger, didn't, to my knowledge, he didn't use perspective at all. But look, Peruzzi obviously was seduced by the invention of Piero della Francesca and Francesco and Brunelleschi. He was also a painter, Peruzzi, like many artists and architects, many architects at that time. Well, most of them, they were artists, actually, sculptors, painters, and so on. Unlike today. Today, the architect is a businessman, is a homo economicus, but this was not the case then. And they knew how to draw. I mean, how many architects today can draw like this? I know I can't, and I know many can't. But at that time, there was no, and you couldn't fool anybody because there was no Photoshop, there was no way to draw other than this way with your own hand. And you either knew how to do it or you didn't. I mean, this man was buried near Raphael. And Raphael was one of the great masters, greatest masters. So you can imagine, you cannot be, I mean, I'm sorry, I will say something provocative, but you cannot draw like Bjarke Ingels and being buried near Raphael. You just can't. But the times changed, today many even famous artists and architects draw in a cartoon-like manner. They, this kind of drawing that the Renaissance artists did is beyond us. Peruzzi. No, this is not a drawing. Anyway, I hate Alami. I really do. Sorry, I should remove these small resolution pictures because they are simply not satisfying. But we'll go through them like this now. Look at this kind of drawing. This kind of drawing shows skill and sensitivity, and you try to imagine what an architect who drew like this would build, and we'll see what he built. You can see that there are architectural drawings and there are artistic drawings. Like this was his activity. He was doing both. Paintings. Architecture. So Villa Farnesiana in Rome. The villa was constructed by Baldassare Peruzzi between 1508 and 1511. So 500, more than 500 years ago. Here it is, a Renaissance building through and through. Villa Farnesiana. Now we asking ourselves, how will our buildings look 500 years from now? Sorry, I named it wrongly. It's Farnesina, not Farnesiana. Farnesina, Villa Farnesina. Quite a difference now between this stair and this one here. Baldassare Peruzzi. This work was done by Raphael, who died young, I think at 37. One of the most remarkable artists of all time. So Sala delle Prospettive, this was a way of breaking the wall through pictorial means, because this is painted, but it still gives you the illusion of extended space. Palazzo Massimo alla Colonne. The Palazzo Massimo alle Colonne is a Renaissance palace in Rome. The palace was designed by Baldassare Peruzzi in 1532, 1536. I think he died in 1536, on a site of 3 contiguous palaces owned by the old Roman Massimo family and built after arson destroyed the earlier structures during the sack of Rome in 1527. In addition, the curved facade was dictated by foundations built upon the stands for the stadium, Odeon of the Emperor Domitian. It fronts the now busy Corso Vittorio Emanuele II, a few hundred yards from the front of the Church of Sant'Andrea della Valle. This is a very interesting building. I was always intrigued by it because it's pendulating rather precariously between being rectangular and being curved, and it's almost manneristic, actually. It's almost modern. It's almost, if he didn't have these columns here, but even with the columns, having different spacing between them is, I find him here as being an innovator, quite quite courageous. it's interesting the facade of the building, because if you compare the plan, you see it's symmetrical. And this part here is as wide as this part from here to here. But you look at the plan here and you realize that, you know, it's just added this thing, an interesting arrangement of spaces and rooms. Baldassare, Peruzzi. I love these old pictures with the patina on them, where not just the subject, the matter is old, but also the photograph is old. So it's a double melancholia here on the side of the viewer. Now look at these columns. I think it's interesting, this entrance into this building with a dark background because of the depth of the open space behind the columns. It ended abruptly, and I am myself surprised because I expected maybe I have somewhere another presentation on him. Anyway, we ended with this remarkable. In fact, I will show it again because I do like very much this this picture. It's almost like this picture is begging me to continue this. I guess I couldn't find too many works by Peruzzi on the web, but somehow this entrance into this building is inviting me to further explore his work. Now we go to the second architect we talk about today. So this was Baldassare Peruzzi, and now we go to Elias Holl, not Stephen Holl, but Elias Holl, a German architect who is considered the best late Renaissance architect in Germany. Elias Holl, born in 1573, so later than Peruzzi. Peruzzi died in 1536, so he was born almost half a century later and died he lived a longer life than Peruzzi, died in 1646. So Elias Holl, he was born on the 28th of February in 1573 in Augsburg and died on the 6th of January, 1646 in Augsburg. Was the most important architect of late German Renaissance architecture, and he built some interesting buildings in Augsburg, where he was born. So he was the architect and constructor of Augsburg's landmark, the Augsburg Town Hall. More buildings in Augsburg are Zeughaus, Wertach, Tor, a tower, the Stadtmetz, that's the butcher's house, quite a house. I guess butchers were always doing well. Saint Anna Gymnasium, an addition of the Perlach room, I don't know what this is, and the Heilig Geist Spital, a hospital, I guess. Anyway, this was the man, Elias Holl. Easy to remember his last name because it coincides with the name of Stephen Holl, a contemporary architect who became 74 years old at the beginning of December last year. But this is Elias Holl. Here is a book on him, and we'll see some of his buildings. The Augsburg Town Hall, a building which was rebuilt in good measure after the Second World War, during which it was bombed, and we are going to see a picture or two with the building bombed, but the Germans were careful enough to rebuild it properly. And what we look at now testifies about the devotion to do a good job. And they did. So Elias Holl, with a building that was rebuilt after the Second World War. And it might be that this little building here, a little compared to the town hall, this one is also by him. We are going to see pictures of it, unless there are similar buildings in Augsburg, but it's very similar to another one that he built also in Augsburg. This is the city hall, but look at the splendid hall indeed. I mean, his name was Holl, and we look now at one of the most formidable halls in any kind of architecture. I imagine this was rebuilt because I saw pictures without, a ceiling, this ample space. Incredible work. Look at it. Thanks to the fascination that humans have with wars, this is how the building looked after the Second World War. Yes, but miraculously, it was rebuilt. The devastations of war. Why humans can still create, maybe the word is not proper. Why they still wage wars, I don't know. I really don't know. Unless there is a demon of self-destruction in us that we cannot control. So this is the city hall, the town hall of Augsburg, and I'm happy it was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt with reverence and with hard work, I'm sure, but it was done very well. Now, another building by him from 1602, 1607, so house. This is also good. This is, well, it's a Baroque building. We see here, the Stadtbaumeister, Elias Holl. So we read that he was a late Renaissance German architect. Well, between the late Renaissance and the Baroque, it's not such a long distance. And that's why, you know, there are traces of the Baroque aesthetics and the Baroque mentality here on this facade. Now a tower from 1605, I don't know what that means, Bertach, Brücker, Tor, a tower it is, here it is, still standing after, you know, 400 years, a little more than 400 years. Elias Holl, who died on this day, the 6th of January, but a different year, of course. Augsburg does seem like an interesting city. Now, this is the butcher's house, the Stadtmetz from 1609, and quite an impressive building. You could almost say it's the city hall of the city, but it's not. It's the house of the butcher. Now, I don't know if meat was sold there, but probably not, or I don't know, but it seems it was a very prosperous business. This building is competing with the town hall of Augsburg. Just yesterday, I learned that, you know, surprise, surprise, apparently the pollution provoked by cows and their breathing is it's almost as big, if not bigger, than the pollution provoked by cars. It's hard to believe, but I learned that in the United States alone, there are almost 100 million cows, and there are almost 300 million cars. And apparently, 2 cows pollute the air like 1 car in 1 year. It's hard for me to believe all these statistics, but that's what I read. Strange. Yeah. Why so many cows? Because the humans love to eat, you know, the meat coming from cows, and the cattle, you know, the cows also produces milk, and you know, there are in Iowa, in the United States, I don't know how many millions of cows and so on. So it's a big business with cows. By the way of the butcher's house in Augsburg, which we see here, you know, distinctly pictured by this engraver, the building by Elias Holl. I wonder what the butcher felt like, you know, living in such a building. And in the morning, you know, descending to the job of, you know, cutting animals. Strange. Such a dignified building. And here is a proof about the function, the narrative of the building. Yes. Okay, a gymnasium from 1613, less impressive as architecture than the butcher's house, but still these buildings, they look like brand new almost, you know, because of the hard work of the Germans who rebuilt them and refurbished them and so on, took care of them. Elias Holl, again. We are going also to see a hospital, this one, and with this I'll end this short presentation on Elias Holl, built from 1626 to 1631, well, you know, rebuilt and refurbished quite well, as you can see. You are going to see also a picture, an older picture from a different time of the building, and you see the difference between how the building was restored and how the building used to look like. Well, not in the 17th century, but maybe at the beginning of the 20th century or so. Look at it here. So this was also built by Elias Holl. This is how it looked like maybe 100 years earlier, and this is how it looks like now. And I have the last image of this short presentation, like an engraving, a graphic work showing the long facade of this building. I don't know when this was made, maybe, I don't know, the 19th century, the 18th century. Anyway, that's it about Elias Holl. And now we go to the last architect that we talk about today, a very important Belgian architect, Victor Horta, truly a great master of Jugendstil in German. So let's see slideshow. Okay. Victor Horta, 1861-1947. He lived for 86 years. So Victor Pierre Horta, he was born on this day, the 6th of January in 1861, was a Belgian architect and designer and one of the founders of the Art Nouveau movement. Art Nouveau is what in German is Jugendstil, and in French is Art Nouveau. His Hotel Tassel in Brussels, built in 1892-1893, is often considered the first Art Nouveau house, and along with 3 of his other early houses, is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So Victor Horta was born in 1861 on the day of the 6th of January. The curving stylized vegetal forms that Horta used influenced many others, including the French architect Hector Guimard, who used it in the first house he designed in Paris and in the entrances he designed for the Paris metro or the subway. He's also considered a precursor of modern architecture for his open floor plans and his innovative use of iron, steel, and glass. His later work moved away from Art Nouveau and became more geometric and formal with classical touches such as columns. He made a highly original use of steel frames and skylights to bring light into the structure's open floor plans and finally designed decorative details. His later major works included the Maison du Peuple in Brussels, the Centre for Fine Arts in Brussels, and Brussels Central Station from 1913-1952. This was the man, a man who was not happy to just build, walls and floors and roofs and so on, but needed the fluidities that can be found in nature in various ways. And this came back to life somehow through parametric design these days. Here he is. I like this picture. It's a typical Victor Horta interior. It has a level of complexity, and the details add to the formal exuberance. Quite a good architect, Victor Horta. Some drawings. You can see from the drawings what he was up to. You couldn't do this with a T-square and a rectangle. You can't. Now you would probably say, why such complications? Well, I mean, what would art be without these so-called complications? It makes me think of the world as a labyrinth. Now, this is a very important work, and we read a little bit about it, the Hotel Tassel from the turn of the century, 1892, 1893 in Brussels. Here it is from the outside with an impressive bow window. It's a building which stands out even today if we compare it to the building on the left or the building on the right, and the interior even more so. Well, some I think this is a bourgeois building. This is a building that, is not very democratic, but I think beauty is democratic. Yes, the inhabitant of this building was not a proletarian, but I think beauty transcends social distinctions. Now look at the mosaic on the floor. So who says that architecture is not art should look at this picture. And not just this picture, of course. We saw works by Peruzzi, we saw works by Elias Holl, we see now works by Victor Horta. The truth is we impoverished immensely architecture with our obsession with space. Space, and that's all we know, space. But architecture is not just about space. Maybe the space here is not so spectacular, but look what's going on here. Look what's on the walls. Look what's on the floor. Look at the glasswork. Look at the parapets. The handrail, the rails are themselves artworks. Are we thinking of such matters these days? Not many of us, I'm afraid. It's also true we don't have the craftsmen that that time existed. But this work was done without a computer. You know, it's very elaborate, and you know, it requires a lot of skill and detailed work, and it was done properly, very much so. It's fluid, no? But it's fluid also on the walls, and the walls are not white like in the works of Zaha Hadid. There are similarities between the fluidity of this work and some fluidities afforded by parametric design, but there are also differences. Here you also have pictorial art, you know, and you would wonder, why do we need it? Well, why do we need frescoes in the, you know, on the walls of Peruzzi? An excellent work by Victor Horta in Brussels. Well, if Paul Valéry was right that the architect is the one who makes the stones sing, then we could say Victor Horta was an architect, you know, because it's very musical, the building. As we look at it, it tells us at least a longing, a desire towards music, inert matter of architecture to become musical, to sing. Hotel Tassel, Brussels, built at the turn of the century. So it was a townhouse for the Belgian scientist and professor Emile Tassel. It is generally considered as the first true Art Nouveau building because of its highly innovative plan and its groundbreaking use of materials and decoration. Did I just read the word decoration? Yes, decoration. I am mentioning this because in many parts of the world, decoration is still banished from architecture. But as you can see, major architecture works did assume and did employ decoration or ornament, together with three other townhouses of Victor Horta, including Horta's own house and atelier. It was put on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2000. We already know this, we read it. It is located at this, I hope I have images of with the house that he built for himself as well. But this is still the Tassel, the Hotel Tassel. This is his own house. actually, if I'm not mistaken. I'm a little bit confused because this image here does not belong to Hotel Tassel. And I plan to double check this, and I didn't. All in all, it is a different sensitivity from what we have today, because we don't have, although the later works by Zaha, especially after she died, no, even while she was alive, the latest works by Zaha Hadid did move in the direction of, flowery design, a certain centralization of form, even symmetry here and there, like the big airport in Beijing, in China. So, Zaha moved dramatically from Malevich towards something else. And here, of course, it's an individual work done with different means, but both Horta and Zaha searched, for fluidity. The fluidities of Victor Horta are a little different from Zaha's, but they are still fluidities. Maison Autrique from 1893, towards the outside, maybe it's not so announcing what is going on inside. But this one is different from Hotel Tassel. I'm sure a very comfortable building and house. Another hotel from 1894. Victor Horta in Brussels or Brussels. Now look at these parapets, now balustrade. Look at them, and compare them with much of similar works in the present, where most architects would just use a piece of glass here without any kind of so-called complication. It's a difference, because this is not just utilitarian. Is a part of the architectural work which announces, in a way, I mean, it's not just about protection. Of course, it has that function, but it also, it's something that where the imagination and the skill of the architect manifest itself. And in present day architecture, often we don't pay attention to this. Carlos Scarpa did, but Carlos Scarpa was one of the very few architects who paid attention to the most minute detail. Even the best architects today don't care too much about how a railing looks like, or a parapet. No, it's just from Tadao Ando to Kengo Kuma, they all do the same thing. A piece of glass, and that's it. Most of the time, glass. Why this obsession with glass even there? you know, because that part is supposed to give you the impression of solidity you know, so you would not fall. Of course, that glass is very solid and unbreakable, but the impression you have because of its transparency is of not being there, and it is there. It's a very different attitude here. Look at this beautiful vertical element at the beginning of the stair. You know, it announces the event of beginning to climb the stair. It's important, just like the entrance into the building, into a building. You don't do it in any way. You do it in a meaningful way to announce you the transition between the exterior and the interior, between the horizontality of the slab and the verticality that the stair implies. So it is an event, an announcement, you know, and it's supposed to be like this. And I'm happy it is done like this. And there are many other similar events here going on. This is architecture, you know, it's an architecture which refuses to be, you know, so-called mainstream in a banal way. It's a creation. Hotel Frison, 1894. Look at the ceiling. Victor Horta. I'm absolutely sure an architect who does something like this is not bored. You cannot be bored and do something like this. And if by doing something like this, you know, you escape the tragedy of boredom. Because to put it simply, it's about beauty. I mean, look what's going on here at the bottom, you know. Why did he complicate himself? But what is the alternative? To rush quickly to the TV and turn it on and watch some horrible, horrid movie made by HBO, instead of creating something that is, you know, enticing and provocative and, you know, original. Another hotel, but it was demolished in 1950. I don't know if I have a picture here. I have, but look, it's magnificent. It's beautiful. You know, you don't even know exactly what it is. You have to look a little more carefully at first. And it's done with matter, with materials, with steel, with glass, with iron, with wood. Yes, but all of these together, they come together singing. Why was this demolished? I do not know. Look at these children here. You know, I know in all pictures when photography was not very often used, you know, children, and not only children, would stare at the photographer with a lot of curiosity of interest. Look at this little girl here. Everybody is curious about what is going on, because you imagine the person who photographed this had a giant apparatus, was not a, you know, a mobile phone, a so-called smartphone. No, had a giant apparatus. The vehicular traffic was stopped, if there was any vehicular traffic, and so on. This is a recreation. No, not a recreation. It was demolished, the building, and they saved the fragments, and they are displayed horizontally in a museum. So the vertical facade became a horizontal facade in a museum. Interesting idea. Well said, but still interesting somehow, Look, fragments of the building exposed on the slab of a museum. So yes, the vertical facade became horizontal. Maybe a book could be published called Horizontal Facades. Villa Carpentier, also at the turn of the century, and the villa it is. It's hard to name it any other way. He also designed furniture. We are going to see some at the end of the presentation. Now, another important work by him, Hotel Solvay in Brussels, 1894. Victor Horta. He didn't do this, artwork actually here. He just did the building. But the building invites to that kind of imaginative installation, if I am to call it so. He obviously liked the butterflies. He obviously liked the peacock tail. A few days ago was the birthday of an Italian architect, but with ancestry coming from Belgium, Luigi Moretti. And so he was, at least in part, the Belgian himself, Luigi Moretti, and he had a collection I showed in the presentation, but I didn't make the presentation because on that day, I think only one person, the generous Natalia, was here. And I didn't make the presentation, but on the presentation, I included graphic works by a very interesting, another Belgian artist who was also friends with Emile Cioran. Maybe I'll make the presentation on Luigi Moretti at some other time. Belgians are interesting, and Victor Horta proves it. Now, it's very possible that this kind of interior would have infuriated Adolf Loos. To be infuriated by beauty could be problematic if that beauty doesn't match your definition of it. Another hotel, they are remarkable, these lit, naturally lit skylights and ceilings, glass ceilings, they are very eventful aesthetically. But Rem Koolhaas probably would have said you can be miserable even in such a building. You can have a terrible fight with your darling or whoever right under this magnificent, beautiful, almost celestial ceiling. I think with his cynicism, Rem Koolhaas was rather right. You can be miserable in the most beautiful building. But this shouldn't mean that we shouldn't build good buildings or beautiful buildings just because we can be miserable in any kind of building. No. But maybe, an interesting film could be made, an interesting movie, like, Broken Marriage in the Solvay Hotel by Victor Horta. I'm not sure if I pronounce well Solvay or Solvay. I have to double check. I guess my French is not good enough to always know the correct pronunciation. Solvay or Solvay, I have to double check. But I think the interior is impressive, even if you are not very nostalgic. The appearance of the octagon, the beloved octagon. I made a presentation a while ago about the octagon in architecture, number 8 in architecture. Yes, the octagon is very important in architecture, but not only in architecture, in its symbolism and even its mystique are impressive. Apparently, Leonardo da Vinci loved the octagon, but he was not the only one. I did myself once a project, and unfortunately, I don't have pictures of it. A Center for High Technology in the United States, where I used 4 octagons diagonally. Imagine 2 octagons, and then on the other diagonal 2 squares, like here, and another one here. No, here. No, here. And then the octagons would decrease to become squares in plan, and the squares, the bottom would increase to become octagons after 4 levels. So it was, anyway, it's hard to explain perhaps through words, but I like octagons myself. House and studio Victor Horta. So this is his own house, or was his own house. It's the Horta Museum now, from 120 years ago, 122 years ago. So he built it at the turn of the century. Look again at the beautiful railing. You know, I truly think that an architect could revenge herself or himself on the banality of much architecture by at least creating an interesting, you know, innovative rail. Is the least we can do. And you see here, you know, there are these elements which add something to the building. I guess his studio was here, not bad, you know, you can imagine how he worked here. Look here, other innovative parapets or, you know, railings. Yes, they mean something, and they look, they almost become, you know, plant-like. It's true, you cannot do something like this easily without the proper craftsmen to help you craft such things. Because, okay, you might be able to draw them, but who builds them? At the turn of the century, in a country like Belgium, of course, there were such craftsmen, but today, maybe even in Belgium, they are hard to find. Look here, you know, the world is a labyrinth. You have, you know, such details do matter, but who uses something like this these days? Although we might be able to build skyscrapers kind of like this, but at the level of what we call detail, this is almost non-existent these days. So this was his own house. So who says that the shoemaker cannot make shoes for himself is wrong, or was wrong, at least in this case. Look, it is symphonic here, you know, it's musical. All this fragment, literally, of the beginning of the stair is musical. This one is different from this one. And I like to imagine that this could generate in the user of such a room and such a stair a feeling of I don't know, of belonging to aesthetical sophistication, which again, from the perspective of Rem Koolhaas, does not preclude one from being extremely miserable. It's possible. Anyway, Victor Horta lived well and created well, and his work is a proof. Okay, 3 stairs, they're all different. Using fractal geometries for the parapets and the railings seems to be, you know, a convenient way to bring in some architectural lyricism into the building, or architectural poetry. Now, Maison du Peuple, which was also demolished, yes, in 1965, after the Second World War. It escaped the war, but it didn't escape the bulldozers of who knows what so-called developers. This was the building. This time, not a private, I mean, not a private residence, but a public building, Maison du Peuple. And too bad it was demolished. You know, how could you demolish such a building? In fact, we shouldn't demolish any building. Look at this, detail here. You know, this accidental, idiosyncratic, a little bit, but you know, this is important. It asserts life as it is. And there is regularity, there is rhythm. But there are also deviations, deviant art. Here is an example of deviant art. It's a good building. I really don't understand how could they destroy such a building. You know, we are talking about a sophisticated country with people, you know, reading books and going to museums and so on, a rich old culture, and they destroy it. They destroy such a building by a famous architect, their own. Incredible. And who knows what horror was built there. I hope I don't have a picture with a building that replaced this building. But look even at the interior. Look at the magnificent structure, you know, which is, yes, it's structure, but it's also ornamental. And it has a level of, you know, it's ordered, but it has a level of complexity and architectural lyricism. It was destroyed. La Maison du Peuple. Maybe that's why, because it was La Maison du Peuple, the house of the people, and not the house of someone who was above the people. Hotel Max at Halle, also in Brussels. Look again at this, you know, effervescent, you know, this exuberance of Victor Horta and dealing with the parapets, with the mere so-called mere parapets. Because these parapets, they accompany the stair, the dynamic movement on the stair. They are themselves dynamic. They are not static. But today, most even excellent architects, they don't care about such so-called details, and this is a great loss, in my opinion. It's an art that is almost lost. A house for the art critic Sander Pierron, 1903. I guess he knew how to work with brick as well. He still loved about windows. And look at the whimsical, this is a little door leading into it's a cabinet here. It's not, but it's important to do something like this. It's whimsical, it's interesting. It's not just a new utilitarian door. No, it's architecture. The Grand Bazaar, it was demolished. Yeah. Well, it's through this kind of sensitivity, this kind of aesthetical disposition that Art Nouveau displayed, was for many people still rather uncomfortable, too sensitive, too sentimental, too lyrical, too fluid. We want straight lines. We want, we don't want such complications. But this building to be destroyed, to be demolished is, sorry, I cannot have gentle words. I call it a crime. A store. Now from 1989 is the Belgian Center for Comic Strip Art. Sorry for the resolution of these pictures. Well, the the so-called extravagances of his younger years seems to be gone, almost gone. And I think it's a loss. I mean, look at it, is this building better than Maison du Peuple? I don't think it is. But these were the times, now we build buildings like this. So he became more and more so-called modern, betraying in a way his own, I would say, glorious past. Another villa, 1905. The Belgian pavilion at the Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes in 1925 in Paris. A little stiff, I would say, a little too willing to sacrifice certain sensitivities for the rhetorics of, representation and power and authority. (1925) in Paris, Victor Horta. And now some details, because the details, what we call the details, are very important in his work. And, it's truly an architecture which celebrates architecture or itself through these original meanderings at a smaller scale. Like here, this corner is in itself a creation. And, again, just like, although he was a very different architect, Carlos Scarpa, but Carlos Scarpa also paid attention to the smallest thing, a square millimeter or a square centimeter. It seems that Victor Horta, in his own way, very different way, he did something similar. Everything became, I mean, look, this is a small part of the building, but it becomes an imago mundi in a way. It's or here. And all of this is because he welcomed what we call vita contemplativa. This is about contemplation, and the ornament is serving contemplation. Unfortunately, we banished ornament and we banished the contemplative life, or the contemplative side of life, something he didn't do, at least in his earlier works. I love these so-called details of so-called complications of Victor Horta. Now, I'm sure if you use the handle of this door, even just once, you would remember it, because it was eventful, it was unique. Unlike any others, look at this. I think it's magnificent. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small, but it's not small in spirit, it's generous. It's cryptical, it's provocative in its own way, it's mysterious. Or this. Why don't we do such things any longer? Because we don't. We import, the details from who knows where, instead of creating them in the spirit of the work at large, if possible. He was a poet. And as Frank Lloyd Wright said, great architects are great poets. They are poets not writing with words, but so-called writing with steel, with stone, with glass, with wood, and so on, through the matters that architecture uses. Victor Horta, a magician. A magician who didn't kill the wonders of the world, but amplified them. And in this way, he would have pleased a poet like Lucian Blaga. Thank you. And happy birthday, Victor Horta.